Hi, I'm James Brookes, and welcome to From the Factory Floor, a conversational podcast about all things startup and tech, brought to you by the folks at thestartupfactory.tech. So, welcome to From the Factory Floor from the folks at thestartupfactory.tech. Very kindly today, as a last-minute step-in, as unfortunately the dreaded Rona is still around and reflecting in. Alexa has managed to join me. Hi, Alexa.
Hi, James. Good to be here.
How are you doing?
Good. I know I'm off the bench replacement, but looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, you do tend to stay on the bench a few for these, and just get in for a couple of ones when you need to. I think we had you for the pragmatic CTO last time. And our star of the show this week is David from Praetura. Hi, David.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks. How are you?
Excellent, thanks. Excellent.
So I think everyone knows who I am now, if they're listening, and probably know who Alexa is. But David, do you want to just give a 2-minute intro to yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a founder of Praetura Ventures and the overall Praetura Group. We are a VC based in Manchester and with a focus on trying to do things a bit differently. One is that we are based and invest in the north of England predominantly, and then the second is just how we go about sort of trying to help the founders build the best business they can once we've invested. So yeah, I think that's probably our whole ethos. We have across the Praetura Group built sort of since 2011 to about 400 million of assets under management and lending book. We have a venture capital business and an asset finance lending division. And in the venture capital space, we launched our first fund, having done a number of deals deal by deal. We launched our first fund in 2019 and have raised 110 million quid since 2019, with 80 million pounds raised in the last 12 months. So really on a bit of a growth curve ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite impressive sort of what you guys managed to do. And obviously, I think we spoke to Ben a couple of weeks ago. And I mean, obviously, like you say, you really focused on the north of England and, you know, obviously based in Manchester. What is it that makes, obviously, we do things differently is kind of one of the things that Manchester's kind of tried to say is its own little thing. But what is it that makes you, you know, really look to invest in the north and especially Manchester?
It's where we're from. So there's a little bit of pragmatism there. It's where I was born, grown up, and raised, and where our founders are from. I think the second reason is that there's a real opportunity because there isn't enough VC funding in the north of England. There isn't many VC firms based in Manchester. There isn't enough capital going into back founders in the north of England. And to us, we see that as a problem to be solved, but also an opportunity to potentially exploit for our investors, because it gives us we're in a real opportunity to back the very best talent out of the entire region. I think at the early stage that we invest in, there is a real benefit in having a local VC firm and VC partner to the founders, and that sort of local element allows us to kind of hopefully become something of a VC of choice for founders in the north of England, particularly where we are in Manchester, and therefore we can there's a belief that we can help founders from the north, from Manchester, build international and world-class businesses, which obviously then benefit from growth. And the other, I guess, the third limb to that is Manchester's just a great place to build early-stage tech businesses. Quality of life and cost of living and all that sort of stuff is potentially advantageous against London, without saying anything negative about London and the great city that is.
I mean, I always used to call it the big smoke, and every time I went down to London, quoting the song from Sweeney Todd, but less about that anyway, because that's far more interesting.
Hang on. Let's hear a bit more about Sweeney Todd.
Well, I mean, less about the pies and the haircuts, to be honest, although I could do with one at the moment. But it's one of those things, because obviously, Alexa, from the CSF perspective, we've obviously focused on Manchester and the north as well. And I mean, what's your impression of the sort of tech scene in Manchester and sort of the want of innovation around Manchester and startups?
Yeah, so I mean, just to reiterate what Dave said, Manchester is just a great city. I see myself as adopted Mancunian. I love this city, and I think it deserves to be the leading city in a lot of things, not only in tech and VC capital as well. So, as you know, I'm quite passionate about it. I'm trying to get techies in Manchester step up to run these world-class companies that we at TSF start, and maybe that Dave with Praetura supports, because I think we have everything we should have in this ecosystem to build really the next Silicon Valley of the world, not only in the UK, here in Manchester.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the best football teams anyway, or at least in the north of England. I mean, I'm not sure, David, if you're a football fan or not.
I'm a Liverpool fan, so I'm not quite sure how I meant to.
It's still the northwest.
I think if we just move swiftly past that.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm a Burnley fan. So you're not.
That means you're a true football fan.
Well,
yeah,
true.
Someone who can go through that.
It's the line between bravery and idiocy, and kind of where you want to sit on that. But I think we've always wanted to embrace, Manchester, and having a VC in Manchester that's got that same ethos, and obviously started whether it's coming to us or building their own thing, and then having a place to go where someone who wants to do things differently. And I think some of the videos you've done on LinkedIn and your series around what people don't tell you about VCs is probably some of the advice that people really want or don't usually get. So what was it that really prompted you doing that series?
I think there's just a lot of nonsense written about VC. There's a lot of survivorship bias. You hear about the massive deals. You hear about businesses raising billions of pounds, or you hear about businesses being a startup and raising 100 million quid or whatever it is. You look at Fast, which is in the news today, raised 125 million pounds, got to 600 and something grand of revenue, went bust and was burning $10 million a month, right? I mean, that's nuts, but that's what you hear a lot of in the VC world. It's dominated by London, it's dominated by Silicon Valley. And I think that when you sort of listen to a lot of the things that are talked about there and the advice, it's kind of not practical for most founders building most of the tech businesses that they're building. It's kind of very much focused at, people read about blitzscaling, about, the LinkedIn version of blitzscaling, and just raise as much money as you can and build as quickly as you can. It's like, for most people, that's very, very bad advice, because unless you can go and convince yourself to go and convince Silicon Valley VC investors, very few people are writing in England, and particularly in the north of England, are writing 10 million, 20 million pound checks for a very, very early stage business. So I think that when we looked at kind of what the systems and the media portrays in VC, a lot of it just felt like it didn't apply to the majority of people. So we tried to put together something that said, right, okay, well, what is the reality of raising money, and why is it so difficult, and why is it well reported that only 1% of businesses go and raise VC, and all the sort of advice on how to create your pitch deck and what to do and who to speak to, and go and speak to 100 VCs. It all just feels like, to me, it just feels like a lot of people creating an industry about pitching to VCs, when actually it's pretty straightforward. Create something that tells your story in a really authentic way, and go to people who want to listen to that story, and who invest in people who look and sound and and are like the business you're trying to build. To me, it's really simple, and it's massively overcomplicated by an entire industry of people trying to tell you bullshit.
It's amazing how many times you hear, the stories of, like, say, the 300 million, 30, 20, whatever it is that people are raising. And often I wonder what startups are actually looking to raise that cash and what they're doing it for. I mean, we've always taken quite a pragmatic approach. I know, like, also the pragmatic CTO stuff you've looked at. And when you look at some of the startups and the sort of sums they probably want to raise or need versus what they need to raise, I mean, a lot of it feels sort of ego, or almost just wanting to show off.
A lot of it's vanity, and a lot of it's trying to get to the next place as quickly as you possibly can. And I think a lot of it also is kind of a little bit backwards, isn't it? So if you raise 20 million quid, by definition, your valuation has to be 40 or 50 million quid at least, because otherwise the VC absolutely swallows the cap table. So I think if you can convince someone to raise 20 million quid, you almost backwards engineer to a high valuation, whether that's valid or not. And I think there's a whole raft of reasons why it is, but it's also because founders and the media focus on the very big raises. It becomes as if that's the norm, as if people are writing 10 million checks, willy-nilly for people with an idea and a PowerPoint presentation and an Excel spreadsheet. For the vast majority of VC and the vast majority of founders, that's just not what happens. And personally, I think that there's a massive danger when you raise money that you raise too little. So many founders come to us and say, we need 500 grand. And you look at their plans and you're like, you definitely don't need 500 grand. You probably need 2 million quid. And I think there's an assumption that raising 500 grand is easier than raising 2 million quid because it's a smaller number. But on the flip side, there's a lot of people. There's a real danger if you raise too much money because you kind of don't know what to do with the money, and you kind of end up in a situation where probably the board are saying, "Well, we've got the money, let's spend it," and then you think of ways to spend it, and before you know it, of that 10 million quid, 5 million is wasted on fancy offices and perks for people that they don't give a shit about, and people doing jobs that probably don't need to happen. And I think when you're an early stage founder, there is an absolute benefit of being a little bit lean. Learn the entire business. Do the things that you don't want to do as a CEO. Do the late nights when you're kind of like, oh shit, I wish we had someone who could do that for us. But actually, it's me. So I'm going to do it. And I think you learn a lot about the business that way. So at the danger of sounding a bit like, simplistic, there's a little bit of Goldilocks about a fundraise. Definitely don't raise too little. I don't think there is a danger of raising too much too early because expectations are massively increased. If you look at Fast, I know I've mentioned it already twice, but it's something I've been reading about in the last few days. I can only imagine the expectation of when you've raised $125 million in 3 years and your revenue is 600 grand a year. I can't imagine the pressure the founder must have felt to be like growing something, doing something, achieving something. Whereas if they'd raised a bit less, maybe the pressure would be a little bit less, and maybe they could have iterated and done stuff and maybe grown a bit. Well, it's hard to grow slower than 600 grand after 3 years. but you know what I mean.
But it's like, say, it's like
Dave, I've just listened to a couple of your videos, and one of them you say importance of being ready for the pitch to the VC, just being ready really to tell that story. And there's something I also kind of followed up a bit recently on social media about almost accidental pitches, people going to VCs just to test the water, as it were. Is that something you see as well? And what would you say to people doing that?
I think people take a bit of a throw it at the wall and see what sticks approach to raising money from VC, right? It literally is. You, whoever it is a VC. Here's my deck. I'll throw it at the wall and see what happens. I think you can be so much more strategic about your fundraising process, right? There will probably be 10 to 20 VCs who absolutely perfectly fit in what they back B2B SaaS, they back life sciences, they back AI, they back direct to consumer, whatever it is, whatever you're doing, and then also stage of life. So they do 1 million. We do a check between first check is 1 million to 3 million is our ideal position, right? Some people will do 250 grand to 500 grand. Some people will do 5 million to 10 million. Like if you think about those things, the sector, space, size, that narrows your VC universe down quite a lot. And then pick the 20 best fit for you and go and do those things properly rather than trying to manage 100 relationships and doing each one badly. Manage 20 relationships and do them well. And I do see that people come in like, you can almost tell where they're kind of just testing the water. And it's not a problem. But I think when you're trying to build a relationship early, I think you can definitely kind of just tell the VC, look, I'm figuring it out. I'm not quite ready. I'll come back to you in 6 months. But I just wanted to kind of get your sense of whether you're interested. VCs will definitely tell you if that sounds interesting. It sounds like what they do. That's something we definitely will do. But what comes across is when you kind of forget whether is it Is it actually a pitch, or is it actually an early stage conversation? Is it a relationship building exercise? Like, what is it? There's just a bit more honesty required across the entire industry, across VCs, from VCs to founders, founders to VCs. Honesty is really important. And if you have an honest conversation, say, look, I'm just testing, I'm thinking what I'm doing. This isn't my pitch, but I'd like to talk to you about it. Great. I think most VCs would listen. I think most VCs would give constructive feedback to the best ability they can. But I think people kind of, I'll try this and maybe it'll work, and if they like it, then we'll, maybe we don't need to do the whole thing. It's just, I think just people need to treat VC fundraisers more systematically, more like you would on a B2B sales process, CRM, moving people through the gears, approach the people who look most like the that was a solid dog bark. Approach the people who look most likely to fund you, and then approach them in a systematic way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for honesty and having people actually being at the right stage, because we've had, we get approached by a lot of startups who've got ideas, and I think some of the most refreshing conversations are the people who actually go, I'm not quite sure what I want to do yet. I just kind of want some advice, or I just want to be pointed in the right direction. And it's incredibly refreshing versus, people who come in, I've got this brilliant idea, looking at raising 100 million in 2 years' time. You're going to be generating 10 million revenue in year 3. And you kind of just go,
no, you're not.
Probably not.
No, you're not.
And, you kind of just go, the people who come in and kind of that level of honesty, and I think it's something that we look for in some of our founders, that very grounded approach.
Honesty, authenticity, humility, really powerful indicators for me. Yes, it's a sales pitch. Yes, you want to tell the best story you can, but the best stories aren't, this is a foolproof plan, and by the way, we're definitely going to be a unicorn in 2 years' time, and and then you've got the hockey stick business plan that shows, oh look, in 5 years' time, we're going to have profit levels like of basically the GDP of a small country. Like, it's it's unlikely. I'm really glad that you've got that ambition, and I think it's important, but I think a lot of people, they just immediately go into 100%, 100-mile-an-hour sales pitch of, let me tell you how fucking great I am, and my business is, and this opportunity is. It's like, well, just hang on, just slow down. Let's find out what it is, why you're doing it, what drives you, what's really important. And I think, in terms of that series that I do on LinkedIn, one of the things that I sort of talk about a lot is, not every VC has to be told that you're going to be a unicorn. Like, it's not. Every time I ask a founder these days, I'm like, what are you actually trying to achieve? And they're like, we're going to be a unicorn in 5 years. Yeah, great. Okay, that's good, but why? Like, why are you doing this? What drives you to get up every day and try and build this thing you're trying to build? The numbers will kind of take care of themselves. If you build a great business with a great product and a great fan base of loyal customers, the numbers will take care of themselves. It's not a goal in and of itself to be a unicorn. And it's also not a goal to be like, in 2 years' time, we are going to raise 100 million at 500 million valuation. Again, that's focusing on the outcome of a fundraise, not build a great business with a great product with people who love using whatever it is you're building. The numbers will take care of themselves. If you grow rapidly, you will always be able to raise money in VC land. That's just a given. People focus too much on fundraising and not enough on, I'm just going to build something awesome. And I think most VCs get really excited about people who want to build something awesome. And that's really what we're here for.
Solving genuine problems is kind of the thing that I would look for when we have our first conversation with startups, is, like I say, not talking about the money, not talking about what they want to raise, how much revenue. What's the problem? Who's got the problem, and how does this fix it? Why is this the best way of fixing it?
And why are you passionate about solving that problem? Yeah. Like, what, for me, one of the things that, and it's not a be all and end all. It's not like a straight red card if it happens. But I find people who search for a problem less backable than someone who's lived a problem.
Yeah.
I think, there's lots of people who come at this from a kind of consultancy basis of, I've looked at this market and this is a problem. And then you speak to someone who's actually lived with the problem. So, one of our favorite ones in our portfolio, Patchwork Health, is about helping sort of flexible working within NHS. The founders lived it. They were doctors. They were involved in projects at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital on working with flexible working. They were involved in the real problem. They knew doctors with the real problem, and they knew the NHS trust's problem because they worked in that environment. They were perfectly positioned to see the issue and how it might be fixed. I think someone coming into that from the outside world goes, I want to help the NHS workers work more flexibly, but they've never, yes, that's probably a ultimate goal and a problem that needs to be fixed. But if you've never really lived it, how do you know how to solve it?
It really helps the authenticity. It's the basis of the authenticity at that stage. I think Reese, Social Plug, one of our startups, was, he was an actor and he's seen the problems with influencer marketing, that people are just wasting money because he got thrown so much stuff, and he's like, I wasn't adding to their product because that's not who my followers were, and that's why he's then built this. And he understands the problem, and imagine there's a couple of startups that we've worked with who you think that authenticity really shines through.
Yeah, and it's just so invigorating as a VC. We get to do one of the best jobs in the world, right? We get to work and support founders build awesome things. And when you find those founders who are, passionate, talented, and authentic about what they're trying to do, it's like it's the best part of our job, and it's the best part that we get to go on the journey with them, and we get to be part of it. We're not in any way the star of the show on that. The founders and the business is obviously the star of the show, but it's the best part of doing what we do. So what we're always looking for is those founders you just think, fuck me, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this thing, whatever it is they're building. It doesn't really matter what it is. It just matters to, I really want to be part of that. That's going to be so
It
exciting.
is quite universal, isn't it? I mean, for us as well. I mean, our founders are much earlier stages than someone who would talk to you as a VC. But it is about that authenticity, really. It is universal, kind of, knowing the problem themselves. And those are the people we typically pick to work with. So there's a lot of common sense in this, really. So it's more than just, a VC or not.
No, it's not. This is nothing to do with VC. This is no VC insight. Like this is just people. This is about what people, and this is if you're out there trying to, if founders are listening and thinking about raising money, whether it's us or whether it's me or whether it's VC or whether it's earlier stage, whatever, selling the mission, the vision, the way you want to do it, and why it is important to you is as important as the metrics or the the size of the problem that you can go on and solve. It's about like that. I want to come on a journey with you. I want to be part of the team. I want to help you. I want to see what you can achieve, in partnership with us. It's just a people thing. That's not VC specific, not advice, is it? Because I think it also applies to selling, right? So if you're selling your product to someone, I'm much more likely to buy from someone who really cares about what they do and about what they are believing in, especially, and that applies to sales team, founders, doesn't matter. It's just people buy from people, and remember, VCs are in the game of backing people. We want to find people to back. People overcomplicate this whole thing.
I think people overcomplicate startups at times. Like you say, it's all about having a genuine problem that you've experienced and selling it to people who are experiencing it, and having that genuine background, that real drive. And then, to be honest, like I say, raising money then becomes easy because you've got the passion for it and you can tell people want to do it.
Yeah, the other overcomplication that people do is convince themselves that they know perfectly what it is they're going to do with the money, and whatever issue there is they're in the business, or that there are zero risks to that business being the next unicorn, right? Massively overcomplicated. People think about it far too much. I'd rather hear people go, I don't really know what might happen in 2 years' time, but what we're building is a team of people who can figure it out, or we can, that's more real, isn't it? Like we've built a Praetura, and I can't quite. It still amazes me. We're sort of 130 odd people now. When we started, I didn't see it going to get to 130 people. I didn't think we'd get to 30 million of revenue across the group. I didn't see any of that. We started and we built and we learned and we changed, and it took us 8 years to, in the venture space to really work out what we're doing. And I think we've actually found ways of doing it at scale probably over the last couple of years. Like, we didn't know the answers. Anyone who pretends that they know exactly where this is going and all the solutions, it just doesn't feel real to me. I think founders want to, or feel the need to, present something that is flawless and doesn't have risk and is a no-brainer for an investor. But nothing is that, right? And actually, by sort of going down that road, you end up feeling it's a bit less backable, because we all know that that's not the case.
Not the case.
But that's what people feel like they need to present.
Mm.
And again, just be real. Like, we're building this. We think this is going to happen. We think this might happen. I've heard so many people say, in year 4, we are going to do 30 million of revenue. I'm like, I guarantee one thing: the one number you will not hit in year 4 is the one that's in your plan. So don't say it's definitely going to happen. Don't act as if it has already happened. What you might be looking at is, we think we can get 100 customers, and we think the customers will pay us on average this. The maths then says that ends up at this revenue, but that's not the same as saying in year 4 we are going to hit 40 million revenue, because it's too much certainty in an uncertain thing. Startups are uncertain.
It's something like, say, it's that almost having to. It's almost like a dating profile. You need to present yourself as the perfect human being, or you need to present yourself as the perfect business. When the fact that you show your flaws and go, do you know, like, say, we're not entirely sure exactly what all this is going to do, but this is how we're going to approach it. Yeah. This is kind of, roughly speaking, the money's going towards this.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's definitely not saying just come to us and say, we want you to invest 3 million quid and we'll decide afterwards where we're going to spend it. Like, I think there's definitely I might have been guilty of oversimplifying, but I think being too certain on what the outcome is one of those things that, to me, is a bit of a warning flag and a red flag for founders, because life just doesn't work that way.
Now, I'd like to see how many financial predictions had the last 2 years in. And they predicted that beforehand.
And I think, to be fair, one of the things that we sort of see ourselves, and slightly potentially differently from Praetura, is we're founders ourselves, right? We've built a number of businesses. I guarantee you, we hit virtually none of our budgets in the first few years. And therefore, I've kind of got a bit of a skepticism for the budgets, and equally, it'd be very ironic for us to kind of really beat founders around the head if they don't hit budgets, because when I've been building businesses, we didn't hit budgets. I think we're 11 years in, and we might have a chance of hitting this year's budget, which would be probably the first budget I've ever hit. And so there's just no point in putting too much store by it. It's a good idea of what might happen. There's definitely some unit economics things that are really interesting in all of that. And there's definitely a kind of cost-based thing that's really interesting. But from our perspective, it's a guide to what might happen. And definitely, certainly from my perspective, I've got real empathy for when you miss the budget, right? You're all trying to do it, but life gets in the way. We all think we can achieve things a bit quicker than we might do. And then on the flip side, sometimes you achieve things way quicker than you might have put in the budget, and there's good and bad variances to budget. So I think it's just one of those things that I've seen it myself. You can't, as a VC, get too excited about whether you do or don't hit budget, as long as the people are moving in the right general direction.
But the thing is that you're practicing what you preach. You say be humble and authentic, and that's what you can do that for your startups, because you understand, you've been there, you've been a founder. You understand the journey and the issues.
It's empathy, right? It's empathy. We've raised money. We've founded businesses. We've made some investments and done some things that don't look great in hindsight. We've made mistakes in the way we've built our business. We've hired the wrong people. We've been seduced by a CV and had to eventually, part ways with that person. And usually that's an expensive parting of ways, right? But those are the things that happen when you're building a business. Nothing is perfect. And I think for VCs to not have that empathy would be a real worry sign for me if I was a founder raising money.
Well, I'm just very conscious of the time, David, because I think we could probably talk all day, to be honest. I think it's been a really interesting chat, but we like to end on a takeaway that, if some, not Chinese and Indian, but just to see if what I always aim for the cheap laughs. It gets me something.
They're the best kind.
But it's what advice. So say as a founder sat listening to this, what's the key advice if they're going to come and approach Praetura or just approach their fundraising in general? And there's one thing you wanted them to take from this. What would that be?
Okay, can I extend it to two?
You've been a good guest, so you can have two.
Wow, a good guest, excellent. That.
Well, it depends what the two are, right?
I'll take that. The first thing is tell your story. Don't tell somebody else's story. Don't tell the story that somebody else thinks used to raise their money. Tell your story about what you're doing. It comes back to all the things we talked about, authentic. And the second thing is, if you want to raise money, the best way of raising money is to go to people who invest in things that look like what you are. So go to the 20 VCs, definitively invest in what you are currently building. So look on their portfolio on their website. If you see lots of businesses that look a little bit like you, go to them. If you see lots of funding raises and they're like, if you're raising £1 million, don't go to Sequoia. They're never going to do £1 million. And that's the really obvious extreme, but just don't do it. Go to the people who are trying to find businesses that look like you. Your chances of success are massively increased because you are wasting time trying to convince people to change their investment thesis or criteria, because they never will, because they have their own investors who they've promised to invest in businesses that look like a certain type. And therefore, you're never going to change it. No one is ever going to change their investment criteria or thesis for one individual startup. So tell your story authentically. Go to people who are looking for people that look like you.
I couldn't give better advice. Like I say, the advice for people who come to us, I'd always say, be genuine, know what your problem is. Don't, have an idea of what numbers you're kind of aiming for, like we said earlier, but focus on the problem and solving it. And I think it was Ian always says the money will then come. It's like the applause for solving the problem.
The money will always take care of itself. If you are growing and doing something genuine and helping do something great, building a great product, money should come. VC is not this mystical art, right? We are a business in that our business is investing in other businesses. If we don't do any investments, we're kind of fucked up, right? So we're actively disposed to most. This is one thing that I do see a lot with founders. It's almost like VCs are the gatekeepers of money, and you've got to try and like it's a battle to get through. But remember, VCs are in the business of investing. We want to invest. We want to see things that look great to us. We want to invest. That's how we go about doing our business. It shouldn't be a battle. It should be, you're a great business, building a great product, doing a great thing with great vision of what you're trying to do. And we're a business that is trying to invest in people that look exactly like you, or businesses that look exactly like you. And therefore it should be a simpler process than I think most people make it out to be. And in particular, the media makes it out to be.
Alexa, how about you? For any startups that are approaching people like Praetura or coming to talk to us, what would your key piece of advice be?
I see it being an entrepreneur as a series of starts, always a new start. Start with your idea, start with first MVP build, first funding, first Series A, and so on. So I think approaching every stage as it is a start, with that, what we said many times on this podcast, humility, honesty, and hard work, really, that will pay off in the end. So nothing comes off from nothing, and you have to show that as an entrepreneur as well.
That's a great analogy, and one that I will be stealing and using liberally as if it was my own idea in the future.
You're welcome.
You'll catch it on David's next video. And then
I promise
you guys have a smile going.
That'll be a LinkedIn post. That'll be a video. Everything to start. I love it.
Well, thank you very much, chaps. I think that's all we've got time for. David, we'd love to get you on again. I really enjoyed that chat. And thank you very much, Alexa. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you very much both for your time.
Really Thank you.
I think that just about wraps things up here. If you have any thoughts or questions on anything we said today, get in touch, whether that be through our Twitter @RealTSF or email at hello@startupfactory.tech, or feel free to drop in for a coffee and a chat. As ever, thanks for listening.